Namaste and welcome to the Bharat Varta podcast. One could argue that there hasn't been a more interesting time in geopolitics than what we're witnessing right now. Newer alliances have been formed, the older ones are getting reconfigured, and we're seeing massive shift that will impact India and the world. On this podcast, we'll discuss how India-US relations have evolved under the Biden presidency. Some of you may remember we did a podcast earlier this year on what one should expect from an Indian perspective with a new administration in the White House. Some things have panned out as expected. There have been more than a few surprises as well. So joining me today to discuss the current state of India-US relations, I'm delighted to have Srimoy Talukdar with us. Srimoy has appeared on Bharat Varta earlier. He's a senior editor with First Post and writes on foreign policy, politics, and defense-related issues. Welcome, Srimoy. Thank you so much for being on the podcast, and so good to finally speak.
Yeah, thank you, Roshan, for inviting me.
So, Srimoy, to begin with, many had called the Biden administration an Obama 3.0, saying that the ideological consistency that had kind of deviated under President Trump will revert to the mean, and that we should expect a return to the Obama years, so to speak. What are your thoughts on how things have panned out since January?
In India, at least, there is always a tendency to overplay the ideological aspect of the India-US ties when it is clearly the strategic imperatives that are driving the relationship forward. In fact, Modi has now met three US presidents, Barack Obama, Donald Trump, and Joe Biden, and one could see a very definite strand of continuity running through all the three presidents. He managed to strike good relationship with Barack Obama as well as with Donald Trump. The chemistry was there for all to see. And with Joe Biden also, he had a very warm relationship. And we all saw that, they shared a very good chemistry when they met for the first time face to face when Modi went to the US. So the point is that these things wouldn't have happened had not there been strategic imperatives driving the relationship forward. At the end of the day, whatever your personal preference may be, but as the head of a state, you have the nation's interest in your mind, and that holds true for both US and India. So when national interest drives a country's relationship with another country forward, then other things tend to fall in place, which is exactly what is happening with the Biden administration. Another thing that we tend to forget is that many of the things which happen in US, being a democracy, just like as in India, it has got a lot to do with democratic constituencies, domestic constituencies, rather than sending a message across. For instance, India has, I'll just give one example. India has a very good relationship with Bangladesh Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina. This relationship has strengthened over the years. There will be, of course, differences. Bangladesh has some misgivings over Tista. We have differences over what is happening in Bangladesh right now, the atrocities being carried out against Hindus. But you would have noted that Prime Minister has refrained from saying anything publicly, but in private, he has sent a message to Sheikh Hasina. The point is that the relationship is always tested on the domestic political altars. When Biden and Kamala Harris were mayor candidates, and when they were coming up with their proposals of what they will do, we all saw that Indian media make a very big deal out of their positions on Kashmir and other things. But we tend to forget that those treatises were aimed primarily at their domestic audience rather than towards India. Because they had to, in the Democratic Party from where they come from, is not a monolithic organization. They have their own constituencies, they have their own corners. So there is a progressive corner which has a certain agenda. There is a not so progressive liberal corner which has their own agenda. There's an economic corner. So they have to satisfy everyone when they are planning to mount a challenge to rule as the head of the state. So I wouldn't take those things very seriously, and I don't think that we can form policies based on what they have said to their audiences. So whenever an American president, or a candidate who wants to be American president comes up with certain things on Kashmir or something, we should always take that with an idea that this is primarily aimed at their domestic audience, because when they come to office, that will be governed by the strategic imperatives primarily, and which is what has happened. So regardless of what Biden and Kamala Harris might think about BJP or Prime Minister Modi per se, but you will find that right now they're driving the relationship even closer than what Trump did. What Biden did after coming to power was that first he suggested a Quad Leaders Summit, which was not there during Trump's time. And then he went ahead and suggested an in-person Quad Summit. So clearly he wants to drive India and US even closer. So even if there is an ideological problem there, that ideological difference or that wrangling over values will always come second to the strategic imperatives right now. And right now, India is a very crucial partner for the US, simply because of the fact that as one of the largest democracies of the world, the largest democracy actually, and in the geography that India is in, given its size and its economic heft, and obviously its future prospect of becoming a superpower, the US wants India in its corner, and it believes that India is a democratic counterweight to China. So naturally, every other consideration will come secondary to that primary consideration.
So
So it is entirely in line with that.
Right. In essence, what you're saying is that it's a matter of real politics, right? I mean, obviously, it's a more strategic thing than, posturing and than what we expect will happen on Twitter, basically. Right. So,
you'd have noticed that whenever, even when Modi had bilateral meetings with Kamala Harris and Joe Biden, they did pick up the issue of the values, but then there was a very calm and a very calculated response from the Indian Prime Minister. There was no knee-jerk reaction. He understands that what they have been saying in front of the camera to him is aimed more at at their domestic audience than at India. So, as a mature leader, he understands that the relationship is more matured.
Right. What do you make of the meeting that Prime Minister Modi had with both President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris earlier? If you could draw out some general themes that that appeared during the meeting.
Right. So clearly, during the meeting with Joe Biden, I think there was Prime Minister Modi came out with 5 T's, which is tradition, trade, technology, trusteeship, and talent. So he believes that these are the drivers of the relationship. As far as the chemistry of the meeting is concerned, I thought that Modi has this amazing habit of doing research really well. So you must have noticed that thing about Biden's coming from India a bit. When he came forward with some official documents to prove that actually there might be a connection between the Biden in the White House and the Bidens in India. So he did that extra bit of homework. I think this is typical of the Prime Minister. He goes out of his way to strike a chord with the head of state that he's interacting with. He does his homework. So that bit was clearly there. And I also thought that Biden was reciprocating. And I clearly think, Biden is a veteran. He's been in this foreign policy circuit for decades now. And he also, I think, in 2014, when he was the vice president, he had hosted a dinner for Prime Minister Modi. And I think that went off pretty well. So they clearly share a rapport. That rapport was clearly in visible. I think the meeting between them went off really well. They covered some very crucial sectors, jotted down a few sectors which I thought of special importance. One is the climate action. I think both of them were very action oriented on that. Then there was a vaccine diplomacy. There were some overlaps between the India-US joint statement as well as the Quad joint statement. But I would think that the India-US bilateral statement on certain things were even more detailed than the Quad joint statement. For instance, on vaccine, on climate, and on the space sector, I think India and US, there's a very visible shift in India right now as far as space sector is concerned. Prime Minister Modi has finally showed his inclination to open up this sector to private players. I think he believes that India is, even though India had a good head start in the space sector, it is now falling behind other peers. And space is where all the action is. At least in the next decade, space will be the domain. You must have seen, what China has done. In August, it has just come to light that it has tested a nuclear-capable hypersonic missile that circled the globe before speeding towards its target, which is a very advanced space capability. And apparently it caught the US by surprise. So space is where all the action is. And I believe that Prime Minister Modi understands this. He recognizes the importance that space will hold for the future. And he's invited private players to come and, take part in this sector. He's opening this space up. So it is very important. Along with this, he's also taking India closer to the US space program, something which became visible during the India-US, during his meeting with Joe Biden. There was this agreement which India signed with US on space situational awareness, SSA, which is basically laying down the norms for space in the future. See, it's very simple. When we cannot fight yesterday's war, tomorrow's war will be fought in space. So unless you are laying down the rules and regulations for space, somebody else will. And since US is obviously a superpower in space, it makes sense for India to hitch a ride with the US, and I think that's what Modi wants to do. This agreement, which is called the SSA, the Space Situational Awareness, is very important. I think it has an Artemis Accord, which tries to lay down the rules and regulations, and I believe that it will help India in the long run. Then obviously in vaccine, something which is very important, and there will be once again some overlaps with Quad. I think that what both India and the US recognize, that if you want to counter China's soft power in the Indo-Pacific, then you have to come up with the goods. Merely statements won't suffice. And here vaccine will play a very big part, because China simply because of the fact that it can deliver vaccines to many of these states in the Indo-Pacific. It has got a head start, even though many of these states are not very happy with the state of the Chinese vaccine. It is not effective. Some have turned it, but still, when they needed it, China was there. So this thing of vaccine being made available, this is very important. So I believe both Modi and Biden made their intentions very clear that they are taking it very seriously. So that is another interesting thing. The third interesting thing which I thought came out was that the US position now more or less reflects that of India's when it comes to Afghanistan. Both in the joint statement between India and the US and in the Quad, very clearly it was spelled out that Afghanistan should not be made into a place where terror is generated and exported elsewhere. And I think it is Modi's achievement that he made Biden come out with this joint statement, because otherwise, these joint statements these are matters of great negotiations. Every line is negotiated very hard. So it is. I believe that it is India's victory of sorts that it came out with a joint statement where Pakistan has been clearly said that it should not be making mischief. There is a pressure being put on Pakistan. Afghanistan, India's position is being reflected. So I believe these are clear outcomes in India's favor, which came out during the meeting with Biden. As far as the values question is concerned, which always dogs the relationship, I think that it is, first of all, I think it is overplayed. Second, the US is in no position to lecture anyone on values. Over the years, it has, and this is the biggest problem. The US government during Trump years or even in the Biden years, they have not made values such a big deal. It is mostly made by the liberal media in the US. And, they always sort of have this holier than thou attitude. They believe that they can lecture the rest of the world. But the US is in no position to do that. Number one. Number two, I think the relationship is now matured a lot. There used to be a time, and you'd know this, Roshan, when one article in New York Times would send everyone in a tizzy in India. There will be, Twitter trends. People will come on television denouncing it, this, that, and the other. Nowadays, you will find that there are 30 articles being written on India in Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, and New York Times, and hardly anything makes even a scratch. I think that is because, first of all, there is a fatigue factor of the same thing these guys are saying over and over again. People have stopped reacting. The second thing, and I think this is more important, the relationship is slowly maturing, and that is reflected in all the stratas here as well. I believe that Modi was expecting that Biden will pick up this question of values, which he did. He talked about, but noticeably, unlike Barack Obama, Biden was not giving a direct sermon to Modi. He made it in a roundabout way. He said in a roundabout way that values are important. I think Biden also believes that the relationship with India is so vital right now that rubbing India the wrong way over an issue which might rile New Delhi is not a good thing. But since he has to satisfy his domestic constituency in the Democratic Party, he had to pick it up. Modi understands his compulsions. He took it in his stride and he pretended not to react to it. So that was there. I believe it doesn't merit any more reaction than this. I think it was very well done from both the sides. With Kamala Harris, I think two interesting things. One is that, and this I found very interesting, after the Modi's meeting with Kamala Harris, the Indian side tweeted that Harris apparently picked up the topic of Pakistan exporting terror, and she said that she made it very clear to Pakistan they should not be doing it. So to me, it sounded as if India was making a point to all concerned that Kamala Harris is not such a villain after all. I mean, she understands the import of this moment. She understands the import of this bilateral ties, and she is not going to make Indian bilateral ties a victim to her political agenda. By publishing that tweet, which was supposed to be happening between a vice president and a prime minister, this was not part of the press meet. This was actually part of the private conversation the two had on the White House. So by publishing that, I think India was making a point. In the press meet, however, Kamala Harris did make that point about the values, about the democratic institutions and stuff. And once again, Modi played it really cool. He simply invited her to India. So I thought it was very well done, because these things don't merit any more responses like they apart from what they did. I think it is time that we put these things in their place. Some of the things which liberal media does in the US is also because of the clickbait journalism. They know, and I'm being cynical here, they know that if they make an India baiting column, then just to spite it, a lot of people will comment on it, and it will in turn get a lot of clicks. So I think people are beginning to see those things.
No, that's very thorough and comprehensive. I think climate action is one of those themes that we had discussed in February when we spoke as well, as a key common ground for India and US, right? Especially with this Biden administration. Space as well. I mean, we're seeing so many strides. The Indian Space Association has just been launched, I think last week, right? I mean, about 8 or 9 companies have participated, and I was looking at the stats as well. I think in the last 6 to 7 years, we have done 10x more satellite launches than all of the years before that, right? So which is a pretty phenomenal feat. So the Prime Minister also spoke about the 5 T's, right? Tradition, talent, technology, trade, and trusteeship to redefine the nature of India-US ties. So how do you see the relations between India and US evolving along those lines?
I think, as far as trade is concerned, interesting that this time, before they went into the bilateral meet, the Prime Minister picked up the issue of trade in the pre-meeting, bites which they give to the media. It was the Indian side, it was the Indian Prime Minister who picked up the issue of trade. I found that very interesting because it has always been the US which is goading India on trade, and India has been. There is some realization in India right now that you cannot really firewall your trade and sort of build it and make yourself competitive. That doesn't really happen. India tried doing that in the 70s and 80s. It was a very bad experience, very bad experiment, and we are still paying the price. There is a tendency in the West of confusing the Atmanirbhar Bharat slogan with that autarkism, but I don't think that is true. That is not autarky. What we are simply trying to do is we are trying to make things in India for the world. That's a little different from saying that we are enclosing competition. But I think India now is more open to the point of trade with the US, and I believe that negotiations will start pretty soon, even though a date has not been set. As far as the people-to-people connect is concerned, there was I think a recent announcement that Indians can now travel to the US. I think it was a very recent announcement which was made by the US, if I'm not wrong. Technology is once again a very important driver of the relationship, and I believe that even though there is a lot of brouhaha in India over nuclear submarine technology being denied to India and given to Australia, I'll come to that when we talk about AUKUS. But I think there are some things which India cannot ask simply because we are not a treaty ally of the US, and you cannot have it both ways. You cannot preach strategic non-alignment. You cannot preach strategic autonomy, and then you cannot really demand that every piece of shiny new tech that comes around. So there we have to be realistic. We have to choose what we want. But otherwise, I think India's technological partnership with the US is going ahead pretty well. And I think the other thing, the trusteeship and the talent bit, once again, these are tied to the people-to-people ties. I think that you will see that going ahead, both these governments, both the US and Indian government, will tie up these things with the larger bilateral tie. Under Trump, there was a sort of movement towards a sort of reactionary movement against Indians. I think this is something which the Democratic Party in the US, whenever they come to power, they are obviously not going to go back to the Clinton years. But I believe that they will be a bit more realistic on this front. Yeah, I think that's that. I think, but primarily the relationship is driven by the defense and security strategic partnership, and China is playing a very big role in that.
Right. I think Ashish had pointed out on an earlier podcast as well that we should be fine with the transactional nature of the relationship to a certain extent and let it evolve, right? I mean, all of us have these, as you also mentioned, all of us have these ambitions of like a proper strategic alliance as such, but those will take time to develop as well, and we don't have to cloud our judgment based on that. All of this is in stark contrast to how the US has handled Pakistan, right? Especially post the Afghanistan withdrawal. Imran Khan has been snubbed. He's not been given an audience yet. How do you think this impacts India and Pakistan relations?
First, let us see what has happened to the US-Pakistan relationship. I think with the US finally going out of Afghanistan, its logistical need of using Pakistan as a base has reduced, and obviously Pakistan has not done itself any favor by very publicly cancelling any US offer. Not that an offer was made publicly, but I believe that feelers were sent to Pakistan whether their soil can be used for launching over-the-counter attacks against terrorists in Afghanistan. But Pakistan clearly said that we are not going down that route anymore. So Pakistan has constricted its own option in certain way. But I think more than that, this new generation of US bureaucrats as well as the US politicians are slowly coming around to the fact that Pakistan has been treacherous friend, and the word friend is to stretch credibility. And if you look at what US Secretary of State Antony Blinken told the US Congress during the hearing, that the US has to reassess its role with Pakistan. So I think there is a realization in the US that this cannot go on. There has to be a reassessment. And this sense was carried forward by Wendy Sherman, the deputy to Blinken, who came to India recently. And I thought there were some very clear messages being sent. First of all, Wendy Sherman went out of her way to say that they are de-hyphenating the relationship. US is not going back to hyphenating India and Pakistan anymore. I think that question was raised because Sherman was supposed to go to Pakistan after India, and she's clearly said that there is no question of hyphenation. We are de-hyphenating the relationship. I am going to Pakistan for a very narrow and specific purpose, And once in Pakistan, she also made it very clear that it should not look forward to any favors from the Biden administration because of the way it has been carrying on. And if you look at what is happening in Pakistan, I believe that there is a rightward, a very sharp turn to the right in Pakistan politics. Right now, it is being taken over by a very sharp turn to the right. The center of the median of Pakistani politics is now turning to the right. And people like Imran Khan, they are coming under even more pressure, cater to a Talibanization of Pakistani politics. He has to come out with these statements. He's trying to do a balancing act because even though Pakistan has now chosen China as the new benefactor, Pakistan always wants sanction from the West. Pakistan has always looked for sanctions from the US. But due to this new Talibanization of Pakistani politics, Imran Khan has had to come out with sound bites, which has not gone down well in the US. So the acceleration of the relationship towards a sort of decoupling has become even sharper. Now, how will that affect India and Pakistan relationship? I think main tenet of the relationship is not going to change as long as, I think the main tenet of the relationship is not going to change because for Pakistan, the reason they astray of Pakistan is war against India. That is what they're supposed to do. That is what, because it's a failed state. It is basically an army which has a state, and the army, for it to remain relevant, it must fight a war against India, and maybe it will never win the war, but it must fight to keep itself relevant. That's how it keeps itself relevant. So I don't think the main tenet of Pakistan's relationship with India changing at all. There will be, however, a little more desperation on Pakistan's part because earlier Pakistan, whenever Pakistan always had this habit of putting a gun to its head and negotiating with the world, and the US would come round and ask India to not do anything drastic so that Pakistan doesn't self-immolate. But slowly Pakistan is realizing that that bluff has been called, so its options has now constricted, and right now it can no longer use those bluffs anymore. It cannot influence the West against India anymore. For a long time, I think Pakistan tried doing that, but now it has given up. And you will find that Imran Khan's speeches these days on international fora are turning even more and more bitter. He is sort of ranting more against the US than against India because he believes that India's heft and India's economic power, as well as the fact that India is geographically and strategically important to the US, is a primary reason why its relationship with Pakistan, US-Pakistan relationship is going down. So he's turning more and more bitter. I think in the Pakistan army, which actually sets the policies, there's also a realization that those days of influencing, the US against India is gone. So I believe that there'll be a new realism, but I don't see really the basic tenet of Pakistan dealing with India changing anyway. That exporting of terror will continue. If anything, they now have that strategic depth that they always wanted to. Now they can use Afghanistan, and their possible deniability of exporting terror into India has just become a little more convenient. After all, they had these terror training camps in POK, and India at one point of time, through surgical strikes and Balakot operation, sort of sent a message to Pakistan that sub-conventional options do exist and we can kill you if we really need to. But now that it has a pliant regime in Afghanistan, it can use that space to train the operatives which can be sent to India. So I believe that it has got that strategic depth that it always wanted. I don't think that there will be a huge shift in its stance towards India, but definitely you will find that the sense of frustration with US going up more and more, because right now Pakistan realizes that the US doesn't need it any longer the way it used to, as long as it was there in Afghanistan.
Right. Perhaps something that's even more important is Taiwan, right? I mean, very hot subject. I mean, we've seen everything that's happened around semiconductors, for example, and there's talk of an alliance between India and Taiwan as well. Where does Taiwan figure in all of this?
Well, it's actually a very interesting question, because I believe that right now the Taiwan relationship with India-Taiwan relationship and US-Pakistan relationship is sort of a mirror image in some sense. For instance, the US wants India to be more vocal about Taiwan. It wants India to be more visible in the Taiwan Strait, send its carriers in South China Sea, something which India is not ready to do right now, because obviously it wants, it knows that China is an adversary and it is fighting a battle with China. It has lost soldiers. It is confronting China. It really doesn't want to add to that confrontation by making it so obvious by sending ships to Taiwan. It will, perhaps it will. It prefers not to at this moment. India's primary focus right now is to strengthen itself economically, internal balancing. So India wants to strengthen itself so that it becomes its national composite power grows up more, so that it can then confront China even better than the way it is used to. Until such time, it wants to manage the relationship with China. It will confront China when there is no other option, but it doesn't want to invite confrontation. So I believe that India's relationship with Taiwan will be covert. There will be some signalings made, but India won't want to make it too obvious the way US wants it. Similarly, the US relationship with Pakistan is in somewhat similar stage, because I think India would love US to confront Pakistan, call out its terror sponsoring habit, even though US is doing a lot of it, but there still remains a section within the US administration, within the US bureaucracy, which believes that Pakistan should still be given more threat, should still be given more leeway. And India feels frustrated by that. So I think for India, it's a sort of same thing. It becomes frustrated because it is trying to tell the US that if we are occupied with our Western Front because of the terror sponsored by Pakistan, obviously we will not be able to spare our resources on the Eastern Front and on the maritime front where we have a shared threat, right? But then you will have to call out Pakistan for what it is doing. At this level, there is a sort of wrangling going on between India and US in terms of policy and strategy. I believe that India is finally winning this argument, because if you look at what Sherman did, Wendy Sherman did, she came out here and she said very clearly that we are not mollycoddling Pakistan anymore. So I believe that that's significant. As far as Taiwan is concerned, China is, there's one thing which is happening in China right now. Next year, there's this 20th Party Congress, and then there is the 6th Party Plenum, which is coming up in November. Both hugely important meetings for Xi Jinping, because he wants to rule China for life. He's already got 2 terms. He's eyeing a third. He perhaps wants to be president for life. So for him, it is vital that the murmurs of discontent that he's facing from different areas of China right now, and Xi Jinping is facing a lot of internal wrangling. If you look at what's happening, the regulatory crackdown that he's doing in China, different sectors are being targeted, real estate, online tuition, technology, and all the other sectors. There is a backlash, obviously, and then there is also murmurs within the party, because he's since 2020 he's been launching these huge purges. There is one purge which Xi Jinping has launched because he doesn't believe the police and the security community of China, and these purges are very deep, and many people are, I think, in thousands. They have been found out to be conspiring against the party core, which means Xi Jinping, and they've been outed and imprisoned. So Xi Jinping is clearly a very insecure man. He is not really an all-powerful guy whom we kind of feel that he can do anything. It's not really the case. For him to take a strong stance against Taiwan is of vital importance to show that he's in command. So I think these things are quite related to that. He's sending of so many aircraft to Taiwan's ADIZ, the Aircraft Identification Zone. I think is linked to that. He wants to show that it is strong. But then an interesting thing happened. When these air raids from China went up, there was a phone call between Biden and Xi, and Biden apparently told Xi that the US will abide by the Taiwan Agreement. Basically, the Taiwan Agreement is that the US says that it believes in one China policy, but it keeps its commitment towards Taiwan deliberately ambiguous. It doesn't really spill out whether it will come out to Taiwan's defense when China attacks it or not. So this has been working for so long, and Biden called up Xi to say that, look, we are not going to launch an attack. So, you should not be doing such a thing right now. So after that, in the last message which Xi Jinping read out, I think on October 1st it was, he said that China is not really looking at forceful unification of Taiwan. So we can see some sort of signaling going on here between US and China. But still, the situation is very delicate. Taiwan is spooked. The Taiwanese defense minister has recently said that by 2025, China can actually raid Taiwan and annex it. So we should be ready. And so the situation is volatile. I think here India will sort of be very cautious. It will not really want to invite more confrontation at this stage. Already it has a lot on its plate. It's having a very hard time persuading China to withdraw from the positions that they're intruding. That thing is ongoing, right? And I think the last round of talks didn't really go well. There was a lot of animosity which came out in the statements which were given after that. So I believe that India will play it very cautiously on Taiwan. Right. That's my reading.
Now, we've been speaking for months about India's role in the emerging world order, right? New world order. And a key part of this is, how US and China are at loggerheads. How will India benefit from this sort of a, quasi warlike situation between, I would say not warlike, I mean, but a difficult situation between between US and China. How will it benefit India going forward?
See, as far as benefiting is concerned, first of all, I don't think that any of these countries are ready to go to war. Obviously, there are confrontations, which is inevitable because China is now the hegemon in Asia. It wants to challenge US, the global hegemon's position. And when one country is coming up, the reigning hegemon will feel threatened, and it will do whatever it can to limit the rise of its competitor. So that is what is happening. Now, India being in the same geography as China obviously has a lot of threats and opportunities. As far as threats are concerned, as you can very well see, India has always believed that it will stay neutral in any Cold War. It tried to do that. It was not really neutral. It was in Soviet camp. It wasn't really neutral, but for record's sake, we say that India played a neutral role during Cold War. This edition of Cold War 2.0, if you're allowed to call it that, we see that India is taken a conscious decision to sort of hitch itself towards the US very clearly. And this has happened because for a long time, India believed that it can manage the relationship with China and concentrate on its own rise. But it found out after Xi Jinping came to power that China is not going to give it that space. China is not ready to give India the space to grow. Instead, China has its own agenda, which it is carrying out right now, and India, without trying its best to manage the relationship, has been drawn into a confrontation with China. Because of the fact that India has been drawn into a confrontation, like the incidents that happened in Galwan and all the other intrusions and all, so India had no choice but to go for external balancing. So what are the options for India? It has strengthened the Quad. It has from a member who was a little ginger approached Quad quite gingerly when Quad was resurrected. It has now become one of the very committed members of Quad. As far as opportunities and threats are concerned, I think what is happening between US and China right now, that there was a lot of and this was accelerated during the pandemic. There was a lot of talk about supply chain issues will have to be relocated from China and given elsewhere. Now, India wanted a lot of those supply chain to be relocated to India, but very soon we saw that what was happening is that many companies, instead of totally relocating from China, it adopted a China plus one policy, which means that it will have its supply chain in China, but will also have another option, another supply chain somewhere close to China. And I believe that a country like Vietnam has benefited greatly from that more than India. Vietnam has, it's really come up. If I look at all the electronic goods right now, which are being, for instance, I have a handset which is made by Samsung, and this thing is assembled in Vietnam. Previously, the previous edition of my handset, which was about 3 years back, was assembled in China. So I think a lot of these supply chains are being shifted, but India is not getting that in a way it wanted. That is number one. The second thing is that the other, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, that trade, the CTTP, which many countries wanted India to join, and India didn't join. I think that is because it primarily feared that it will become another tool in the hands of China to dump, goods in Indian market. It didn't join. So there also India, I think, I don't contest India's decision. I think I believe that India had a very good reason in not joining it, but it also constrained India's options in trade. So that is another area where I think it couldn't really benefit. If you're talking about benefits, I think the primary benefit which happened for India was that of that of strategic, not really economic. Strategically, India's position vis-a-vis US has strengthened quite a lot, and the reason that I started by saying that even if there are ideological differences between Biden administration and the administration in India, those things will be secondary to the strategic imperative, and the strategic imperative is, so here I think China has done US and India a great service by bringing the two countries together. There are a lot of synergy which is happening between US and India right now is being driven by a shared threat that both countries are feeling from China. So I think that is the primary benefit, and from there all other benefits also stem, the flow in. For instance, the equipment that India is now sourcing from the US. 10 years back, those were unthinkable. But now it is getting, state-of-the-art drones. It is getting guns, which are state-of-the-art again. And once again, that is because it has signed foundational agreements with the US. And why did it sign foundational agreements? Because it knew that if it has to ward off the threat to China, it has to do some bit of external balancing, which once again brought it closer to the US. So I think in the areas of defense and security, because of the competition between US and China, India has benefited there, but not, I think, so much in terms of economy. I think the economic benefits, which at one point of time it was thought after the pandemic that India will be the beneficiary of shifting of supply chains, that has not really happened.
So on a related note, India acquired those S-400 missiles from Russia, right? I mean, how does that play into US? Because, will not take that kindly, right? So will there be some sort of a formal response, or, will we get away with a little bit of discontent?
Let us look at how US has reacted. Turkey also had got these S-400 missile defense systems from Russia, and US brought Turkey under CAATSA sanctions. But I believe that there is a huge debate within the US right now that India should not be, CAATSA sanctions, secondary sanctions should not be imposed on India. This American Senator Todd Young recently wrote an article saying that US should allow India to purchase the missile defense systems, because these missile defense systems are primarily aimed at China. So it will strengthen India's security vis-a-vis China, and that naturally benefits us. So it is for our benefit that we should not put sanctions. But the problem is that it has been made into law, CAATSA sanctions, and in such a way that it will become very difficult for any administration to bypass those sanctions, or to not impose it on India, because it has been written into the law, and US Congress has the power. And this was done because it thought that they were basically trying to make Trump behave. They thought that Trump would unilaterally waive off these sanctions. So the US Congress was basically trying to Trump proof these sanctions. So now that Biden is in office, I believe there is a huge debate going on. But I don't think that the US has come to a decision yet. If you look at what Wendy Sherman did when she came here, she clearly said that we hope to find a solution. And she also said that it is pretty dangerous for India to go and get this. So I think that US is still trying to discourage India, but there is a very big constituency within the US strategic community, as well as even within the administration, which clearly says that if you are going to sanction India, that will be the end of Quad, and you are going to damage bilateral relationship in a way that it will not recover. And since you need India as a bulwark against China, that will be a suicidal attempt. Which is why I think that even though CAATSA sanctions is right now going through a huge debate in the US, it is my personal belief that eventually it will not be imposed on India. But I'm second guessing here. I think that US till the very last moment doesn't want to give India the impression that it is waiving off the sanctions for two reasons. One is that it doesn't want to appear as if it is giving India the license, and second is I think it is not for Biden administration to give the waiving off like that. It has to have congressional approval. So this thing is pretty tricky. But I think the debate right now is very strong in the US that you should not alienate India by imposing sanctions.
So let's speak about AUKUS, which is a trilateral security pact between Australia, United Kingdom, and the US, right? So you had argued in an article that this has actually opened up a strategic opportunity for India. And this was quite the contrary opinion to many people who thought that, AUKUS will actually be a risk for Quad as such. Could you explain, the brief gist of the article and why you made those points?
Well, first of all, the gist of my article is, if I oversimplify it, is very clear. Anything that hurts China is beneficial to India. And AUKUS, by giving Australia the nuclear submarine technology, it obviously limits China's options, because China is going for it has nuclear submarines, and it wants to increase its arsenal. And if US shares this technology with Australia, and if and when Australia comes in possession of these nuclear submarines, which is of vital importance in the maritime region of Indo-Pacific, then it is only going to limit China's options. It is only going to put some constrictions on China, and that will only be beneficial for India. Remember that India's primary threat from China is in the land border. India is invested in the land border, and it has to fortify itself from China primarily in the high Himalayas. So if another country like Australia, which has the resources, possesses the nuclear submarines which can actually ensure security in the Indo-Pacific, it actually complements India's position instead of constricting it. Also, don't forget, and there is this argument that it is undermining the Quad. First of all, these submarines are not going to come anytime soon. It will at least take another 2 decades for that to materialize. It's not as if tomorrow Australia is getting these submarines. Even if and when they do, that will be in the 2040s. A long time yet. Quad is here right now. It is for Indo-Pacific democracies who have come here to shape China's behavior, and I don't see it being undermined in any way. The third point, why did US not give this nuclear submarine technology to India, and why did it give to Australia? That's a very stupid argument. Australia is a treaty ally of the US, and India is not. On the one hand, you can't really preach strategic autonomy and then demand that a country which is not your ally give you the latest bit of technology which they fiercely guard. They have not shared this technology with any other country except the US, and that too in the 1950s or 60s. 1956 or 60s, I think. This is the second time they are doing it. So you can't really expect US to give you that technology. First, you have to choose. If you want to be a treaty ally of the US, if you want to actually hitch yourself totally with the US, which you are not ready to do. There is Indian policymakers, Indian strategic community is very clear that even though it is doing some sort of external balancing in the US, even though it is sort of going into a grouping like the Quad, it is clear that it doesn't want to militarize the Quad. The Indian Foreign Secretary has said very clearly that Malabar exercises, which is actually, everyone knows that the Quad nations are exercising together, the Quad navies are exercising together, says that it has nothing to do with the Quad. So India is very touchy when it comes to these things. It doesn't want to be seen as a country which is a military ally of the US. So you don't want to be portrayed as an ally, and yet you want the shiny piece of tech. That is a very, very I'd say ridiculous position to take. So that aside, I think that AUKUS, first of all, the concept of AUKUS, because right now it is not a reality. When it happens, it will only aid India's position, because India's primary threat from China is in the land, in the maritime zone. If another country has the resources to limit China's options, if it has the resources to constrict China, then it is only to India's benefit. Second, Quad is not getting undermined at all. I think that AUKUS and Quad are complementary to each other. And as I said, third, India is not really in the position to demand, a sort of technology which the US is only share with the treaty allies.
So this has been a fascinating conversation. I think we've covered wide variety of things here. How do you see things evolving from here? Any predictions for the future? Do you see India continue to play an active role in Quad? What will happen if tensions escalate with China, for instance? What do you see happening?
First of all, I think that we have to be very clear on this, and India also prefers it this way. Even if tensions escalate with China, and even if there is another short conflict or short war, India will fight it on its own. It is not as if its Quad partners will abandon it. No, but India prefers that it settles this issue with China bilaterally. This thing has come up many times in the past, and India has always gone out of its way to say that this is a bilateral between we and China. So that is number one. Second, the US will help, but it will help technology and through intelligence, something which also did during the last conflict. That is not going to change. So I think that even if there is a conflict between India and China in the near future, India will have to solve it on its own, but it will get intelligence and other forms of assistance from the US. It may be it may not be explicit. Once again, I repeat, that is how India likes it. It doesn't want US to publicly aid it in any way. It has never been the case. And there is an argument in the Indian media and among even the strategic community that whenever such a thing comes up, India is all by itself. We have to find all our wars by itself. It's almost like accusing others of saying that you are never going to come to our aid. But the point here is that India prefers it that way. It prefers to deal with China on its own. And even if other countries aid it, and this is a fact that US did during the last conflict, in the Galwan conflict. It is a fact that the US did help it with intelligence and other forms of assistance, which I'm sure it will do. But primarily, India will have to do it on its own because that's how it wants it to happen. But going ahead, I believe that, and this is my educated guess, after the 20th Party Congress, if Xi Jinping manages to hold on to power and stays for another term or maybe more, you will find that there will probably be a solution, at least not a solution, but some sort of a modus vivendi with India on the border issue. But till such time, tensions will run high because he's primarily playing to his domestic audience.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much, Shrimoy. And, it was a pleasure, as always, talking to you. And really, really appreciate it. I mean, hopefully you feel better soon.
Yeah, hopefully too. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Bharat Varta podcast. If you want to see more content like this, then don't forget to subscribe to our channel. We started Bharat Varta to facilitate long-form discussions on politics, policy, and culture. We don't necessarily endorse anything that was said in this episode. If you wish to offer us feedback, do reach out to us on social media. We are at Bharat Varta on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You could also get in touch with us on our website, www.bharatvarta.in. The links are in the description below. Until next time, stay safe, take care, and Jai Hind.